The massive Imperial starship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Its dark metal hull stretched over 3 miles long, making it larger than any ship humans had ever built. On its bridge, High Commander Reeves stood with his hands clasped behind his back, studying the blue planet that appeared on the main screen. "Primitive," he said, his voice carrying the boredom of someone who had seen this scene hundreds of times before. Their most advanced ships still use chemical rockets, showing their military capabilities. The ship's AI displayed images of Earth's orbital defenses, a handful of armed satellites, and a small fleet of space vessels that looked like toys compared to the Imperial warship. "Another easy conquest for the Empire," said Captain Mills, Reed's second in command. "They don't even have energy shields." Reed nodded, but something about the planet bothered him. Unlike other worlds they had conquered, Earth's surface showed strange patterns. Large areas of green and brown were interrupted by perfectly straight lines and geometric shapes. The oceans had countless ships moving in organized patterns. "They're very organized for primitives," Reed muttered. The Empire's sensors detected radio signals, television broadcasts, and internet communications. They had seen similar things on other worlds, but Earth's signals were different. Many showed humans fighting each other in various ways, with advanced jets, massive ships, and endless varieties of ground vehicles. "Send the standard contact message," Reed ordered. "Inform them that the Galactic Empire claims their world and expects immediate surrender." The message was transmitted in all major Earth languages. The Empire waited for the usual response: panic, chaos, or desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, they received a single reply from something called the United Earth Defense Force. "This is Admiral James Walker of Earth. We acknowledge your message and request a face-to-face meeting. We have a diplomatic station on our moon. Your representatives will be safe there." Reed laughed. "They think they can negotiate. Captain Mills, prepare a shuttle. Show them some Imperial technology up close. That usually speeds up the surrender process." The Imperial shuttle, sleek and silver, approached the lunar diplomatic station. Through its windows, Ambassador Stone could see Earth hanging in the black sky, beautiful and blue. The station itself was simple, just a series of connected modules with a large docking bay. Inside, Admiral Walker waited. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He wore a simple blue uniform with minimal decorations. Behind him stood 2 guards in basic combat armor, carrying primitive projectile weapons. "Welcome to Luna Station," Walker said as Stone stepped out of the shuttle. "Would you like to see why you should leave our system immediately?" Stone smiled with all 3 of his mouths, a gesture that usually intimidated primitive species. "Admiral, we are the Galactic Empire. We have conquered 1,042 worlds. Your technology is centuries behind ours. This meeting is a courtesy before we begin the standard subjugation process." Walker nodded and pressed a button on the wall. A large screen came to life, showing images that made Stone step back. Scenes of warfare, not the clean, organized battles the Empire knew, but chaos and destruction on a scale he had never imagined. Humans fighting in frozen wastelands, burning deserts, dense jungles, and ruined cities. "This is just from the last 100 years, Walker explained calmly. "We have been fighting each other since we learned to pick up sticks. Every piece of technology we have was either invented for war or quickly adapted for it." The images continued, massive tanks crushing everything in their path, submarines lurking in dark waters, aircraft carriers that served as floating cities of war, and soldiers fighting house to house in urban combat. "We don't want war with the Empire," Walker said, his voice still calm. "We've had enough war. But if you force us, you should understand what you're dealing with. We aren't like the other worlds you've conquered. We don't fight for glory or resources or territory. We fight to win, using any means necessary." Stone felt a chill despite his environmental suit. "You would dare threaten the Empire?" "No," Walker said. "This isn't a threat. It's a warning from one soldier to another. Look at our history. Look at how we fight. Then ask yourself, do you really want to be the one who teaches humans how to wage war in space? The meeting ended shortly after. As Stone's shuttle returned to the Imperial ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had just made a terrible mistake. High Commander Reed would never accept backing down, but for the first time in his career, Stone hoped his leaders would listen to a primitive species. They wouldn't, of course, and that's exactly what worried him. Ambassador Stone's report troubled High Commander Reed. He had conquered dozens of worlds personally, but none had ever shown him images of their own wars as a warning. Most species begged for peace, not warned about war. Play the human historical records again, Reed ordered. The ship's main screen lit up with scenes from Earth's world wars. Massive armies clashing across continents, cities reduced to rubble, soldiers fighting in conditions that would kill most species. The images disturbed him, but not as much as the final clip. Modern soldiers training with looks of determination rather than fear. They enjoy it, Captain Mills whispered. They train for war even during peacetime. Reed straightened his uniform. It doesn't matter. Our technology is superior. Prepare the subjugation fleet. But before the fleet could launch, another message arrived from Earth. Admiral Walker requested one more meeting, this time with the High Commander himself. Reed agreed, if only to see this strange human up close. The lunar station looked different now. Armed guards lined the corridors, their primitive weapons held with practiced ease. Reed noticed how they watched his guards, analyzing their movements and equipment. These weren't ceremonial soldiers, they were veterans studying potential enemies. Walker waited in a large room with a round table. On the walls hung images of human battles throughout history. Reed recognized some from Stone's report, but others were new, ancient humans fighting with spears, medieval knights in armor, ships with wooden hulls and cloth sails. Your species is obsessed with warfare, Reed said as he sat down. Walker smiled slightly. Not obsessed, experienced. Please, watch this. The lights dimmed. A new recording played, showing humans fighting against forces that should have defeated them. Farmers and hunters defeating trained armies. Small groups of fighters surviving against overwhelming odds. Primitive tribes adapting modern weapons to their needs. We call it asymmetric warfare, Walker explained. Fighting against superior forces by changing the rules of combat. Your empire has better ships, better weapons, and better shields. But we have something you don't. And what is that? Reed asked, trying to hide his unease. 10,000 years of finding ways to defeat better-equipped enemies. Walker touched a control, and the image changed to modern military exercises. Every soldier you see here has studied centuries of warfare. We don't just learn from victories. We learn more from defeats. Each failure teaches us new ways to fight. Reed watched as human soldiers practiced urban combat, mountain warfare, desert survival, and space operations. Their movements showed experience that went beyond mere training. You should understand something, Walker continued. Humans don't think like your other conquered species. We don't fight only when we have to. We prepare for war during peace. We imagine every possible way we might have to fight, then train for it. Right now, across Earth, millions of humans are training and planning, not because there's a war, but because there might be one. Are you saying you want war with the Empire? Reed demanded. Walker shook his head. We're saying we don't want war with anyone. But if you force us to fight, you won't be facing an army. You'll be facing a species that has spent its entire history learning how to win against superior forces. We'll use every dirty trick, every desperate tactic, and every advantage we can find. He stood and walked to a window, looking at Earth. This is your final warning, High Commander. We know we're technologically inferior. We know you have conquered countless worlds. But none of those worlds were like Earth. None of them spent thousands of years fighting themselves, learning and adapting and developing new ways to wage war. Reed also stood, his pride overtaking his caution. You think your primitive experience matters against our technology. "We think," Walker said quietly, "that you should ask yourself one question. Why would a primitive species warn you instead of surrender? Think about that, High Commander. Think about it very carefully." As Reed's shuttle departed, Walker watched it through the station's windows. He knew the Empire wouldn't listen. They couldn't understand that humans weren't showing their history to impress them. They were showing it to warn them. Somewhere on Earth, his wife asked him once why humans spent so much time preparing for wars that might never happen. Now he knew the answer. Because sometimes, the war finds you whether you want it or not. The Imperial fleet appeared in waves, 200 warships emerging from hyperspace around Earth's orbit. Their massive hulls blocked out the stars, each ship carrying enough firepower to level a city. High Commander Reed stood on his flagship's bridge, watching the primitive planet with satisfaction. "Send the final warning," he ordered. "They have 1 hour to surrender before we begin standard subjugation procedures." The message went out. Minutes passed. Then dozens of small lights began rising from Earth's surface. Hundreds of them, then thousands. Reed laughed when his sensors identified them. "Civilian ships," he said in disbelief. "They're evacuating in cargo vessels and passenger crafts." Captain Mills studied the readings with growing concern. "Sir, they're not running away. They're spreading out in a pattern." Before Reed could respond, the first civilian ship slammed into an Imperial cruiser at near-light speed. The massive warship's shields flared and failed, its hull splitting open like a broken egg. More civilian ships followed, each one piloted by volunteers on one-way missions. "Impossible," Reed whispered. "No species sacrifices their civilians like this." The space around Earth erupted in chaos. Satellites that appeared defensive revealed themselves as mines, detonating in clusters that caught Imperial ships in webs of destruction. Human military vessels, small but quick, darted between debris fields, firing primitive but effective weapons at exposed areas of damaged Imperial ships. "They're using the debris as cover," Mills shouted. "Every destroyed ship creates more hiding places for their fighters." Reed watched in horror as his carefully planned assault fell apart. The humans weren't fighting like a civilization should. They had turned their own orbital infrastructure into weapons, using space stations as battering rams and communication satellites as guided missiles. "Launch fighters," Reed commanded. "Clear these primitives from space." Imperial fighters poured from the carrier ships, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves fighting enemies who ignored every rule of space combat. Human pilots flew directly through their own explosion clouds, using the chaos to ambush Imperial ships. They fired missiles that split into clouds of tiny projectiles, turning huge sections of space into deadly shrapnel fields. "Sir," Mills reported, his voice shaking, "we've lost 40 ships in the first hour. Our fighters are down by 60%. Reed slammed his fist on his command console. "Impossible. They're primitives. Their weapons are centuries behind ours." A message cut through the battle chaos, playing on every Imperial ship's communication system. Admiral Walker's voice was calm, almost sad. "We warned you to run," he said. "Everything you're seeing now. These are just our civilian volunteers and our smallest ships. We told you we've spent our history learning to defeat superior forces. Did you think we wouldn't have plans for space warfare?" As if to emphasize his words, another wave of ships rose from Earth. But these weren't civilian craft. They were warships. Ugly, brutal things built for a single purpose. They moved in formations that made no sense until Reed realized with horror that they were creating killing zones, herding Imperial ships into prepared traps. "Sir," Mills called out, "Earth's moon. There's something launching from the dark side." Hidden bases on the lunar surface revealed themselves, launching missiles that no Imperial sensor had detected. The primitive projectiles didn't need to be advanced. They just needed to carry enough mass at enough speed. "Full retreat," Reed ordered, his pride finally breaking. "Get us out of this system." But retreat wasn't as simple as he expected. The humans had seeded the common escape routes with more debris fields. Imperial ships trying to flee had to move slowly, making them easy targets for the aggressive human fighters. In his command center on Earth, Admiral Walker watched the battle displays. "Send the second wave," he ordered quietly. "Show them what happens when humans really decide to fight." The battle was less than 2 hours old, and the mighty Imperial fleet was in ruins. 60 ships destroyed, dozens more crippled, and the rest struggling to escape. But the humans weren't finished. They had spent generations preparing for space warfare, building weapons and drafting plans for the day they might face a superior force. The Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed technological superiority meant certain victory. But they were learning what so many others had learned before. Humans didn't need superior technology to win. They just needed the will to do whatever it took to survive. And that was something humans had in abundance. High Commander Reed faced the Imperial Council through a damaged hologram projector. His once pristine uniform was wrinkled, and dark circles showed under his eyes. Behind him, emergency lights flashed on his flagship's bridge. "You lost 60 ships to primitives." The council leader's voice dripped with disbelief. "How is this possible?" "They don't fight like civilized beings," Reed explained. "They turn their civilian ships into weapons. They hide in debris fields they created from our own destroyed vessels. They—" "Enough excuses." The council leader cut him off. "We are sending the First Fleet. 500 ships, our best crews. Take whatever measures necessary, but Earth must fall. No primitive world can be allowed to resist the Empire." The transmission ended, leaving Reed staring at empty space. Captain Mills approached carefully, holding a datapad. "Sir, you need to see this," Mills said. "Our scouts report the humans are doing something on Mars and their ice moon, Europa." The scanner images showed hundreds of ships moving between Earth's colonies, carrying materials and weapons. The humans weren't cowering in fear of the coming Imperial fleet. They were preparing. In his underground command center on Mars, Admiral Walker studied a 3D map of the solar system. Red dots showed the approaching Imperial reinforcements. Blue dots showed human positions spread across planets, moons, and asteroid fields. "They still think like a conventional military," Walker told his officers. "They expect us to mass our forces and fight ship to ship. Let's show them how humans wage war when we're outnumbered." The First Fleet arrived with overwhelming force, their ships filling the space around Earth's orbit. Their commander, Fleet Master Jones, a name chosen to mock the humans, broadcast his message. "Surrender now, and we will show mercy. Resist, and we will destroy every human settlement in this system." Walker's response came in the form of action. Suddenly, the asteroids between Mars and Jupiter began to move. The Empire had dismissed the primitive mining operations there, until hundreds of asteroids, fitted with engines, began accelerating toward the Imperial fleet. "Scatter the fleet," Jones ordered, but the trap was already sprung. The humans had spent weeks calculating the perfect trajectories. Imperial ships could dodge some asteroids only to be forced into the path of others. And in the chaos, small human ships emerged from hidden bases on the asteroids' dark sides, striking at the confused Imperial forces. "Sir," Mills reported to Reed, "the humans are using the mining tunnels in those asteroids as launching bays. Our sensors can't track them until they're right on top of us." The battle spread across the solar system. The Empire found that every human settlement was a fortress, every mining operation a hidden base. When Imperial ships approached Mars, they faced clouds of surface-to-space missiles launched from hidden silos in the planet's canyons. Europa proved even more deadly. The humans had planted nuclear charges under its icy surface. When Imperial ships got too close, they detonated the charges, sending sheets of ice and water into space that froze into deadly clouds of projectiles. "This isn't warfare," Fleet Master Jones shouted as another wave of ships reported heavy damage. "This is madness." But the humans weren't finished. Their ships began using the sun's gravity to perform slingshot maneuvers that no Imperial captain would dare attempt. They emerged from these wild trajectories at impossible speeds, striking before the Empire could react. In his command center, Walker received reports of Imperial ships retreating in disorder. "Now they understand," he said quietly. "We warned them what would happen if they forced us to fight." The First Fleet, pride of the Empire, was in shambles. They had lost over 100 ships in just 2 days. Their formations were broken, their tactics useless against an enemy that refused to fight according to any rules. On his flagship, Reed watched another Imperial cruiser die under human attacks. He finally understood Walker's warning. The humans hadn't been threatening the Empire. They had been trying to save them from this nightmare. "Send the message," Reed ordered Mills. "Tell the Council. Tell them we need to talk about peace, before the humans show us what else they've been preparing for." Because Reed had finally learned what Walker knew all along. When humans fought for survival, they didn't just use weapons. They turned everything into a weapon. And they were just getting started. The Imperial Council rejected Reed's request for peace talks. Instead, they sent a message that made every Imperial commander's blood run cold. The Third Fleet is joining the battle. 1,000 ships, no survivors. Reed watched the massive reinforcements arrive through his flagship's broken viewport. The Third Fleet was the Empire's ultimate weapon, used only to make examples of worlds that dared to resist too long. But something was wrong. The humans weren't firing at the new ships. In fact, his sensors couldn't detect any human ships at all. "Where are they?" Fleet Master Jones demanded, his voice crackling over the damaged communication system. "Our sensors show nothing in orbit, nothing on Mars, nothing on their moons." Reed felt a chill run down his spine. They're planning something. They're always planning something. He was right. Deep under the Martian surface, Admiral Walker stood in a new command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing Imperial ship positions. Behind him, rows of officers coordinated with hidden bases throughout the solar system. "Begin Operation Ghost," Walker ordered. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The Imperial fleet moved into position around Earth, Mars, and the major moons. Their sensors showed empty space, dead colonies, and abandoned stations. Then the attacks began. Small human ships appeared from nowhere, fired quick bursts at Imperial vessels, and vanished before anyone could react. Supply ships disappeared without a trace. Communication relays went dark. The Empire's mighty fleet found itself fighting shadows. "How are they doing this?" Jones shouted as another supply convoy was hit. "Where are they hiding?" The answer came from Captain Mills, who had been studying the attack patterns. "Sir, remember those mining operations we ignored? The humans. They've turned the entire asteroid belt into a military base. Thousands of small hideouts, all connected by tunnels. They're using old mining ships, too small to show up on our standard scans." Reed realized the horrible truth. The humans hadn't retreated. They had switched to a type of warfare the Empire had never faced. Instead of fighting the massive Third Fleet directly, they were bleeding it dry. "Another supply ship lost," an officer reported. This one was carrying fuel for the Third Fleet's destroyers. 2 communications relays destroyed in the Jupiter sector. Medical transport ambushed near Mars orbit. No survivors. The reports kept coming. The mighty Third Fleet was helpless against an enemy they couldn't find or fight. Human ships would appear from hidden bases, strike fast, and disappear into the vast darkness of space. In his underground command center, Walker studied the results. "Show them Phase 2, he ordered. Suddenly, the abandoned human colonies came to life, but not as the Empire expected. Hidden weapons activated. Automated defense systems emerged from underground bunkers, and dozens of small, unmanned ships launched from concealed bays. "Drones," Reed shouted as the robotic ships swarmed his fleet. "They're using automated weapons." The Empire's weapons targeted the drones, but for every one they destroyed, 2 more appeared. The small machines didn't try to destroy Imperial ships. Instead, they attached themselves to hulls, damaging sensors, weapons, and engines. "This is barbaric," Jones complained as his flagship lost another weapons array to the drone swarm. "Fighting with machines. Where is their honor?" The answer came from Admiral Walker himself, broadcasting on all Imperial frequencies. "Honor? You invaded our home, threatened our people, and you talk about honor? This is what humans do. We use everything we have. Every advantage, every trick, every weapon. We warned you to run. Now you understand why." Reed looked at the tactical display with growing horror. The Third Fleet, the Empire's most powerful weapon, was being torn apart by an enemy they couldn't even find. Supply lines were cut, communications were failing, and every attempt to strike back at the humans only revealed their ships' positions to more attackers. "Send the message to Imperial Command," Reed ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "The humans don't need to destroy our ships. They're going to strand us here, cut off our supplies, and wait until we have no choice but to surrender." Because that was the final lesson the Empire had to learn. Humans didn't just fight with weapons and ships. They fought with strategy, with cunning, and with a patience that terrified their enemies. And they were winning. High Commander Reed sat alone in his darkened office aboard the flagship. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls. On his desk, reports showed the terrible truth. 3 fleets defeated, over 500 ships lost or damaged, and thousands of Imperial soldiers stranded without supplies. A quiet knock interrupted his thoughts. Captain Mills entered, carrying a data pad that glowed in the dim light. "Sir," Mills said, "I've been studying Earth's history. I think I understand why we're losing." Reed looked up. "Explain." Mills placed the data pad on the desk. It showed images of Earth's ancient wars, but not the battles themselves. Instead, it showed how humans lived between wars, how they prepared, how they fought. "Every species we've conquered evolved through cooperation," Mills explained. "They'd fought only when they had to. But humans, they evolved through constant conflict. War wasn't just something that happened to them. It shaped them." As if to prove his point, alarms blared through the ship. Another human attack was starting. But this time, Reed didn't rush to the bridge. Instead, he watched through his office viewport as the battle unfolded. Small human ships appeared from hidden positions in the debris field. They didn't attack directly. Instead, they herded Imperial ships into positions where larger human vessels could strike from multiple directions. "Look at how they move," Mills said. "Every attack teaches them. Every battle makes them better. They're not just fighting us. They're learning from us." Reed remembered Admiral Walker's warning from what felt like years ago. "We've spent our history learning to defeat superior forces." "Contact Walker," Reed ordered suddenly. "I need to understand." The communication took hours to arrange. When Walker's hologram appeared in Reed's office, the human admiral looked tired but determined. "Why did you really warn us?" Reed asked. "You could have let us attack blindly. We would have lost even more ships." Walker's hologram smiled sadly. "Because war isn't our first choice. It's just something we're very, very good at. Look at your tactical display. Count how many human ships you can see right now." Reed checked the display. "None." "Now count how many attacks your fleet has suffered in the last hour." 17. Walker nodded. "That's how humans fight. We're never where you expect. We don't follow your rules of war because we learned long ago that rules get you killed." Every human ship captain out there grew up studying warfare. Not just space battles. Everything. Submarine warfare, guerrilla tactics, psychological operations. As if to demonstrate, explosions lit up space around Reed's ship. Human vessels appeared, struck hard, and vanished again, leaving more Imperial ships damaged and drifting. "My analysts say you've only committed a small part of your forces," Walker continued. "You have thousands more ships you could send. But ask yourself, what would that accomplish? We've turned your own destroyed ships into hiding places. We've made your sensor technology useless. Every Imperial ship you send just gives us more targets. Reed stood and walked to the viewport. You've defeated 3 fleets. No species has ever done that. The Empire. We don't know how to handle this situation. Then let me make it simple, Walker said. Right now, human ships are hidden throughout this system. We have weapons you haven't seen yet, plans you haven't guessed. If you send more ships, we'll destroy them too. Not because we want to, but because we've spent thousands of years preparing for moments exactly like this. Mild spoke up from his corner. You prepare for wars that haven't even started yet. We prepare for everything, Walker replied. That's what the Empire needs to understand. You're not fighting an army. You're fighting a species that turned warfare into an art form. We don't want to destroy your empire. We just want you to understand why starting a war with humans is the worst mistake you could make. Reed looked at the tactical display again. Somewhere out there, hidden in the darkness of space, human ships were waiting, planning, preparing, just like they had always done. Perhaps, Reed said quietly, it's time the Empire learned a new way of thinking. Because finally, after all the battles and losses, the Empire understood the truth. Humans hadn't become great warriors because they loved war. They had become great warriors because they had never had a choice. And that made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The Imperial Council chamber had never been so quiet. Thousands of representatives from across the galaxy watched as something unprecedented happened. The Empire was about to sign a peace treaty with a primitive world. High Commander Reed stood at the center of the chamber. Beside him, Admiral Walker represented Earth. The contrast between them was striking. Reed in his formal Imperial uniform with its many medals, Walker in a simple blue Earth uniform with only a few small decorations. This is madness, one council member shouted. We cannot treat with primitives as equals. Walker didn't react to the insult, but Reed stepped forward. Show them, he commanded. The chamber's massive screens lit up with battle footage from the war. Imperial ships being destroyed by creative human tactics. Supply lines disrupted by guerrilla attacks. The mighty Third Fleet reduced to calling for help. The humans defeated 3 fleets, Reed announced. They did it without superior technology. They did it without massive numbers. They did it because warfare is part of who they are. The council chamber erupted in arguments. Walker watched calmly, remembering similar debates in Earth's history. Finally, the council leader raised his hand for silence. Admiral Walker, the leader said, why should we trust humans with equal status? You're warlike by your own admission. Walker stepped forward. The chamber's perfect acoustics carried his quiet voice to every corner. Look at your records, he said. Every world you've conquered, you had to garrison with troops. Every species you've subjugated, you have to wash for rebellion. But humans, once we give our word, we keep it. He touched a control, and the screen showed new images, human history, but not the battles. Instead, it showed former enemies becoming allies, old battlefields turned into parks, soldiers becoming peacekeepers. We're not great at war because we love it, Walker explained. We're great at war because we've had to be. But we're also great at peace when we're treated as equals. Reed nodded. The Empire has always ruled through force. But the humans show us a different way. They fight harder than any species we've encountered, yet they also make peace more completely. The council leader studied both men for a long moment. And what does Earth offer the Empire in return for this unprecedented status? Walker smiled slightly. Knowledge. Experience. Not just in warfare, though we'll help defend the Empire if needed, but in everything we've learned. Our art, our music, our sciences, and most importantly, our different way of thinking. The chamber grew quiet again as the council leader stood. There will be those who oppose this, he warned. Yes, Walker agreed. And they should remember what happened to 3 Imperial fleets before they start anything. The treaty signing was simple. Two signatures, human and imperial, declaring Earth an equal partner in the Empire. The first world to join not as a conquered subject, but as a free ally. Later, in a quiet garden outside the chamber, Reed and Walker stood watching the galaxy's spiral arms shine in the night sky. "Your warning," Reed said. "When you told us to run, you knew it would come to this, didn't you?" Walker shook his head. "We hoped it would. Humans have learned that the best victory isn't destroying your enemy. It's turning them into friends. The Empire will change because of this," Reed said. "It already has," Walker replied. "Your fleet captains are studying human history. Your soldiers are learning our tactics. And most importantly, you're learning that strength doesn't always mean victory." Reed looked at the treaty in his hands. "Will humans ever stop preparing for war?" "No," Walker said honestly. "We'll keep preparing, keep learning, keep improving. But now we'll do it to protect peace, not just Earth. That's the real victory here. Not that we fought well, but that we showed the galaxy a better way to live." Above them, ships from Earth and the Empire moved together through space. Former enemies now worked side by side, learning from each other. The Empire was changing, becoming something new. And humanity had gained what it always wanted, not just survival, but the chance to build something better. Because in the end, the greatest victory wasn't winning the war. It was making sure they never had to fight another one.